Okay. Hey everyone. Um, Sorry again about the delay in getting this. Believe me, I was pretty sad after I had recorded this whole webinar and realized that the recording didn't work. But hey, um, hopefully that means the second one will be even better than the first. And again, just remember that you do have an extension on responding to this webinar. The response prompt is at the end of this, so you'll get to that. It won't be due until our next in-person class, which is not this upcoming Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. So a good week and a half to be able to watch this and respond to it. Hopefully you're set up to be folding laundry, doing dishes, resting in bed in your pajamas while you're watching this so that you can be multitasking or relaxing too. So anyways, moving on, the content for this class is going a little bit deeper into CBMs and some additional resources outside of AimsWeb that you might find more relevant or more useful or just a helpful additional tool. And then also looking at how we can use work samples as part of our assessment process to help drive instruction, also drive IEP goals and services so that we're really targeting students' needs in a really individualized way. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And then just to preview, next week when we do meet in person, we'll be revisiting AimsWeb. I know you all have sort of a general idea of what AimsWeb is and how it works, but we'll be doing some hands-on practice, some modeling, and I'll also be providing hard copy resources for each different grade level of the different probes or subtests that you'll be using as part of your signature assignment, your case study assignment. We'll also dive deeper into interpreting test results, so looking at actual scores on AimsWeb, scores on the WJ or Wyatt. What do those mean? What do they mean for us when we're developing IEPs and goals? How do we just bring this different data together in an integrated way? And then after that, we will go the next step further, which is more around the actual creation of the IEP, really identifying areas of student strength where we can build on or where they don't need extra intervention. And then, of course, areas of student deficit where we do want to focus our goals, our instructional minutes, and our interventions to best meet that student's needs and make sure that the IEP is compliant, is aligned, and that everyone has a solid understanding of how to go about drafting the different components, such as writing present levels, baselines, Common Core aligned goals, etc. So that's sort of the roadmap of where we're heading. So we're going to step back a little bit further today to more of the direct assessment practices that will help lead in to data analysis and IEP development. So just to revisit, these are going to be some visuals we've seen in previous classes and previous PowerPoints. We're going to kind of bring them back to memory. When we're talking about CBM, we're talking about curriculum-based measure, or thinking about it as like a really quick broken down measure that's targeting very specific skills. So to refresh, these are really short, brief, efficient assessment tools. They usually take 1 minute, maybe 8 minutes at the max per probe, so we can get standardized norm reference data in a really, really short amount of time. It targets very specific skills. So this is not a broadband assessment like the WJ or the Wyatt. We're picking out a specific area that we're curious about, whether that's reading fluency, math computation, spelling, and we're just focusing on that one specific skill. And of course, it is norm referenced, so we can over time see how is the student doing compared to his or her peers over time. Are they starting to get closer and closer to sort of that average range where their peers are performing, or are they staying kind of stagnant compared to their peers? So it gives us a good comparison measure for where we would hope that they would be to be sort of on par with other students their age or their grade. Some examples, of course, are AimsWeb, DIBELS, and then Intervention Central and Easy CBM are some of these other ones we're going to kind of touch on, really focusing on Easy CBM today. So you've all gotten exposure to AimsWeb. DIBELS is very similar, and I'm not going to go into detail on that because that is not adopted by as many school districts, but if you ever currently or in the future work for a school that uses Dibbles, it's pretty much the same as AimsWeb, so you'll know exactly how it works and how to use it, no problem. We're going to focus today on Easy CBM, which is something that you can use regardless of whether or not your school or your district purchases or adopts those tools. It is free to individual teachers. There is a low cost option of $40 a year if it's something that you want to use pretty heavily and pretty intensely, but is a great tool in case you want to have access to CBMs like this and to some cool kind of resources that Easy CBM will do around tracking and graphing student progress if your school doesn't use something else that's already provided. So going back to CBMs one more time, we're going to think back to this sorting task that you did in class and where CBMs like AimsWeb or Easy CBM, which we'll be looking at today, where that really fits into our teaching and assessment practices. CBMs can definitely be used for helping to determine the need for special education or determining the need in specific areas because it is norm referenced. So we can look to see if this is an area where the student is performing far below their peers and therefore kind of unable to access the class content. So typically not something that's used alone in making this determination. No one tool ever is, but it's a good supplement to other assessment tools as well. And because it is norm referenced, we can use it in this way to say, like, really, most of their classmates, most of their peers are in an average range, but this one student maybe is not. They're far below where they should be, so that can help us address this question. Because they are so targeted onto specific skills, they can be really helpful for writing IEP goals. They can give us a very clear baseline, whereas the WJ or the Wyatt will tell us, you know, is the student above average, average, below average? CBMs can give us a much more targeted baseline, like they're able to read 67 words per minute on a grade level reading passage. So that, of course, gives us, you know, some really specific information. And also we can say 67 words per minute is, you know, below average. And so we want them to be reading more quickly and more accurately until they get up into the average range, which, you know, by looking at the norms for CBMs, we can say the average range would actually be, and I'm of course making up numbers here, but we'll go over this next week, but the average range might be 90 words a minute. So it gives us a good roadmap of where they currently are and then where we would like them to be on some of these skills. Based on the norms for where most students are performing. And aligned to that, of course, CBMs are great for progress monitoring because they are so efficient and short to give. When it only takes 1 minute, you can give a CBM probe once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, and really track that over time in a way to see if the student's on track and making progress or if they're not. And because progress monitoring, you know, can be time-consuming or a tedious task if you don't have sort of efficient ways of doing it, using these 1 minute or several minute assessment probes can make it much more efficient and quick. So it's a really great tool for progress monitoring. So looking at this in one other way in terms of what we're looking at today, we've already learned our standardized comprehensive batteries. Based on the results of this, we're going to be kind of digging a little bit deeper into some areas around targeted or diagnostic assessments using CBMs or some of those other reading diagnostics you've learned, and then going one step further to get really, really individualized information by using work samples, which we're going to sort of be comparing to the state standards for where a student should be, and then where our student, our case study student, actually is, to get some really specific individualized examples of where they are achieving and then where they are not and where they're struggling. And by sort of doing all of these things and really honing down to the nitty gritty of where their strengths and weaknesses are, we get a really clear snapshot of then what it is that we as the special ed team needs to do and needs to focus on with this student that's individualized to them and not just kind of a cookie cutter template approach, which can sometimes happen if we're not being really specific in our assessment data. So one other way that we're going to kind of think about this in terms of using CBMs and work samples is first we give the WJ or the Wyatt, of course. And based on the results of that, we can see, is this an area of need for the student within their IEP? You know, are they scoring below average or far below average? If the answer is yes, or maybe if the answer is that they're kind of scoring on the borderline and we're not really sure. I mean, if you think back, you can remember that the norm group for the WJ and the Wyatt wasn't huge. There were fewer students involved in that kind of sample group than we would have expected. So if the student's kind of scoring in that low average range or on the border, we might not feel really confident in saying they're doing okay. We're not going to address this academic area. You know, these are some high stakes decisions we're making about a student's education and about their future. So we do want to be pretty confident when we say they're doing fine, they don't need special ed support, or they're really struggling and they do. So if we're not sure, or if it is clear that they do need support in this area, we're going to do some CBMs and work samples to answer some of these questions to get a better sense of where they are. So by using CBMs and work samples, we can see like at what grade level is the student actually performing. That helps us know what their instructional level is so that when we are targeting instruction and intervention, we're using appropriate level work and assignments and text and things like that. So we want to really be meeting them where they are. And so we first need to know where they are so that we can access the right levels of resources. How can I get a better baseline for this one specific skill? You know, it's not enough to just say they're struggling and they're below average. What are they actually able to do? And then what are the sort of the next steps aligned to that skill that are going to be kind of those critical foundational skills for them to build. So we really need to get that clear baseline on where they're actually performing. And then also, how is the student translating their skills into actual class assignments? You know, yeah, we're working maybe on some of these skills in pull-out groups, in resource classes, or one-on-one instruction, but then how is that actually helping them in their class? Are they generalizing those skills? You know, what are the assignments being given in class, and how is the student able to access those? So by giving CBMs and looking at work samples, we're sort of better able to hone in on these few questions that are going to give us a much better picture of what the student needs. So I've been referencing Easy CBM, referencing CBMs a lot, and you might be wondering, gosh, we went into AimsWeb. We're still maybe not super clear on how that works or how we administer it. Why are we throwing another CBM tool into the mix? Or why didn't we just learn Easy CBM in the first place and skip AimsWeb altogether? Fair questions. And I do want to address that because I do hopefully want this to feel meaningful and valuable to you. So AimsWeb we did learn because it is the most common tool used across districts across the country. So even if your school doesn't have AimsWeb, now it's possible that if you change districts or you move somewhere else in California or out of California, you might be working somewhere that does have AimsWeb because it is the largest, biggest, most popular platform. So helpful to know just for your future practice or to be able to, you know, put on your resume if needed. It also is the most comprehensive and the most common. So once you learn how to give AimsWeb measures, it's really easy for you to generalize those skills to other types of assessment tools, such as DIBELS or Easy CBM. So once you have AimsWeb down, you can be pretty confident that you'll quickly pick up anything else. The other real benefit for AimsWeb is that it's the only one here that includes assessment tools for writing and spelling, which Easy CBM does not. This is reading and math only. And because our case study assignment is looking at all areas of academics for a student, we really need to use something that also addresses writing and spelling. Easy CBM, though, is great because, like I said, if you work somewhere where your school doesn't utilize a program like AimsWeb or like DIBELS that they pay for to allow teachers to be able to use them, you don't really have access to those options. You have whatever's uploaded to our Google Drive for this class, but that's not really going to take you very far if it's something you want to build into your regular teaching practice. So Easy CBM is free or very low cost. There's fewer actual probes than AimsWeb, but still plenty to be able to use on a really regular basis with students. There are options for graphing. The graphs are a little bit less fancy and high tech than you might see with some higher cost platforms like AimsWeb, but still useful and relevant, and we'll be looking at those today. And like I did say, it's for reading and math only. So we're actually going to open this up. I am going to also remind you all that the measures range from K through 8th grade. We find that for most of these types of assessments, it doesn't go into high school level, because once students get to high school, there's less instruction focused on foundational skills like reading fluency or math computation. Students are really getting into, more focused classes for history, science, algebra. So we often don't see measures for those types of high school level classes, but because we are all working with students in special education, if we have concerns that a student is struggling in a given academic area, odds are pretty likely that giving them a 7th or 8th grade level probe is going to be kind of where they are anyways. If they're able to do high school level work, they're probably not going to need special ed support in that area. So even if you do teach high school, these assessment tools can still be just as valuable for your students who are performing below grade level. So let's actually go into Easy CBM. I'm going to show you what it looks like, how to navigate it, and what some of the kind of perks are of using Easy CBM. If it is something that you think in the future you might be ready to build into your assessment and teaching practice with your students. It is free, so you can set up your own account, but if you want to be able to just explore it without doing that, this is my login info, my username and password, so you're more than welcome to log in using my account. And here it is, easycbm.com. You can see right from the beginning that we have a teacher login platform and a student login, so you can actually select certain measures that students can take on the computer on their own, which is great. It means that you don't always have to take time sitting down and administering these things one-on-one. If students have access to computers in your classroom, they can do some assessments online by themselves and you get the scores. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. But first things first, this is what it looks like when you log in. I have the free version, the Easy CBM Lite, but you can definitely upgrade to the $40 a year one, which gives you more individual probes. So if it's something you're going to be using a lot and you don't want to be reusing the same reading passages, for example, you can upgrade in that way, and it can also handle more students. I think the light version handles, you can be using this and tracking this with up to 200 students, which I imagine is more than anyone would ever need. But that is how that works. So the first thing you would do is you're going to add the student that you want to assess or the student you want to track to your student tab. You can see I have a couple samples in here. I'm going to be working with my name as our sample student. You can add groups if you want to group it by certain classes or RSP pullout or however it works for you. I just go here and add individual students like this. Once students are added, you can actually go to then the measures that we have options for giving these assessments on. First thing to note is these are the grade levels. So you're going to be picking the grade level that you think is best for your student, usually starting with their actual grade level, but maybe drilling back to younger grade levels if they're really struggling. But let's say I'm in 6th grade. This shows the different options we have for 6th graders. We have reading passage reading fluency. So just like with AimsWeb, it's a quick 1-minute story that the student reads, and you're just marking their errors and how many words they read correct. Multiple choice reading comprehension, which is a pretty long, like 2 to 3 page story that the student reads, and then they answer multiple choice comprehension questions. Numbers and operations for math, algebra for math, and then number operations and ratios for math. You'll see if you pick other grade levels, the options in the probes are different for that grade level. So going back to first grade, we actually have letter names, letter sounds, phoneme segmenting, word reading fluency, passage reading fluency, and then for math, numbers and operations, geometry, and algebra. So the topics change based on the grade level of the student. But once you pick the one you're going to give, there's a couple of things you can do here. You can see that for some of them, you have your student copy and your assessor copy, just like AimsWeb. So here's the student copy. They just see a basic story like this. The assessor copy, again, similar to AimsWeb, has the directions that you say to the student, has the number of words per line over here, so it's easier for you to calculate up the words they read correctly, and the directions here where you put total number of words that they read minus their errors equals their correct words per minute. So if they got to say here, right after Rick, that's 188 words, and they made 8 errors throughout, they'd have 180 words correct per minute. And then once you have that, you would just go here to enter scores, scroll down to, oh, here I am, Brianna, and then you would put in, let's say, 180, or I guess I did 188 words read with 8 errors, right? And then save, there we go. So that's sort of the data entry piece. But the really cool thing about Easy CBM that I do want to show you is that some of these things actually have a take online option. So by checking it here, you can allow access to all students or specific students to take it online. You can select what type of feedback you want the student to get when they finished. So it'll just say, thanks for taking this. It can give them their overall score in terms of just, you got 10 out of 15 correct, or detailed scoring where it actually shows them the items they missed and what the correct answer was. So depending upon your student and what you think is best for them, you can pick what they see at the end. But this is what it looks like when students take it online. They can select their text size if they want to. They read the story. As you can see, it's for reading comprehension at a 6th grade level. It's a lot of text, but that is more grade appropriate and relates more to what they're expected to do in class. And then they, select their answers and move on, and it grades it for you. Pretty cool. Even better, though, is when you get into some of the math ones where you want to see what the student's actual math abilities are, and maybe they struggle with reading. This will actually allow the student to have the questions read to them so that you know that we're actually testing their math skills and that it's not reading that's getting in the way. So as you can see when you click this, pick the answer first. I guess it, and I'm just gonna click anything here. It will read these different questions to the student.
Which value is least?
Okay, so I really like that feature of this, and it really allows students to take these pretty independently and save you as the teacher a lot of time. So most of these have 9 different probes per topic area. So you could see how that would allow you to maybe give your student this probe once a month over the course of the school year to track their progress. If you feel like it's something that you want them to be taking on a weekly basis, you might want to upgrade to that $40 a year account. But there is enough for about, once a monthly testing and progress monitoring for your students. And then what you actually see after they take a measure, you can see their one-time score that can help you, verify if they're average, above average, below average, or you can see their actual progress monitoring over time. So I'm going to go to individual students, this tab here, and I'm going to pull up myself. And these are what the graphs look like, right? So I put in a couple sample scores for reading fluency and one for math. So the way this works here, and we'll be going back to our bell curve when we meet in person next week, so this should kind of bring that back to mind. We have these different percentile ranks. That's what the PR stands for. 10th percentile, 25th percentile, 50th percentile, and 90th percentile. And in fact, I'm going to actually pull that up right now. See if I can find it. percentiles are shown here too. So you can kind of get a sense. 50th percentile, the 90th percentile would be way up here in the above average range. 25th percentile is right here, still in the average range, but getting to a little bit lower average. And then the 10th percentile is about right here in kind of the lowest chunk of students. And if you remember percentiles would be, you know, in a line of 100 kids, where does this one student fall in line? So if they fall at the 50th person in line, that means they're dead center right in the middle, perfectly average. If they're falling at the 90th percentile, that means they're top 10. They're the 90th person in a line of 100. So they're in that top 10 group of students, which is definitely above average. If they're at the 25th percentile, they're the 25th person in line. They're in the average range, but they're kind of in that lower group. 10th percentile, the bottom 10 kids in that line of 100, those are the ones who are really struggling the most. So you can kind of see that that correlates here, these percentile ranks, to these colored lines on the screen. Any students scoring at the red line or below are at the 10th percentile and below, and we know that they're struggling a lot. This yellow 25th percentile means that they would be, you know, kind of right on that borderline, low average. They might be doing okay, but they might still be needing a little extra support. Gray is that smack dab in the middle, perfectly average score, and then green up here would be kids who are way above average. So we can see that for me on this math, numbers, and operations, I'm scoring just below the 25th percentile. This means I'm, you know, not horribly below grade level, but I'm probably going to need a little extra support. I'm definitely struggling more than most kids. You know, I'm guessing I'm probably at about the, I don't know, 20th percentile here. So I'd be 20th in line in a group of 100 kids. So kind of in that lower grouping. If we look at the reading fluency though, all of my scores are way down here below the red line, way below the 10th percentile. So I am, even though I'm reading 50 to 70 words a minute, that's considered to be very, very slow and inefficient for a sixth grader, okay, because I'm so far below the 10th percentile line. But you can see I've taken this test at different versions, different stories of the sixth grade reading fluency probe across a couple different dates, and you can see my scores here. And then this black line is showing my trend line. So it sort of averages all my scores out and shows my trend line. So you can see that I am slowly creeping up. I'm on a trend to eventually, maybe in a couple months, break into this range above the 10th percentile. So this is how the progress monitoring would work, is if you gave this once a week or once a month, you can actually see this trend line over time, hopefully showing that the student's improving. But if we see that their trend line is pretty flat, that tells us that whatever we're doing isn't working very well and they're not responding. So that's kind of a quick preview of the type of scoring you get and the type of graphing you get, and how that interpretation works. And I think when we go into interpreting scores more next week, that might also be helpful. But that is the reports tab of Easy CBM. So we had reports, measures, our individual students. And then the one other thing I do want to show you is what it looks like to students if they log in. So if a student logs in, you would give them your teacher username. Here we go. They select themselves, and then any of those checkboxes that you marked for letting the student take online will then show up to that student here. So I've given my students access to, say, these 4 tests to take online. They select one, go to take test, and then like I showed you before, if it's a test that reads it aloud to them, they can click here, it reads the question, they get the answer, and then there's, you know, 16 questions for this math test. So pretty quick preview of Easy CBM, but hopefully that gives you an additional tool that you can use either for your case study assignment if you choose to. If you'd rather use Easy CBM than AimsWeb because you think it's going to be more useful, that's fine. Or just if you think that this is something that you might want to be able to use in the future with students, for individual assessment points or for ongoing progress monitoring, I would recommend that you set up an account and kind of add your students, practice with a little bit, and hopefully it will be something that is useful to you. Oh, so again, coming back to this, if we find through giving the WJ or the Wyatt that a certain academic area is an area of need, or we're not quite sure, but it might be, we can use easy CBMs to find out at what grade level the student is actually performing. So drilling back to earlier grade levels until we find where they're performing at least above that 25th percentile line, that tells us that we're kind of in their level of achievement, their level of mastery. We can get a better baseline for specific skills. And then what we're going to shift into next is using work samples to see how students are able to actually translate their skills to their in-class assignments. So that is where we're going next. Looking at student work samples means we're either giving them assignments or prompts in class to investigate a certain area, or we're just pulling work from actual assignments, homework, unit tests that they're taking in their other classes to analyze, to see where they're making errors, where they're making mistakes, where they're doing really well. So this helps us answer how they're transferring their skills to class assignments, how they're doing compared to their peers. So say, for example, we pull a writing sample from an essay and it looks like, oh my gosh, their writing is really weak, but we look at the rest of the students and we see, oh, everyone is struggling with paragraph writing. That can tell us maybe this isn't a skill deficit for this student. Maybe it's just an instructional deficit that is needing to be addressed within the whole class. So we can get a sense of where our student is doing compared to their actual in-class peers and kind of see, is this something that is an issue for the teacher with their instruction, or is this really an issue for our one specific student we're looking at? We can get more information about Common Core state standards and how the student is doing on those standards, which of course we're using in our IEP goal writing, and then more information again about their baseline. Baseline meaning what specifically can they do right now and what specifically can they not yet do right now. That's what the baseline is for a student. So we're going to first dive into writing, how we're actually analyzing writing samples. So really the best way to analyze writing samples in a way that's going to be unbiased and objective, which as assessment practices, we want to be very objective in our assessment, is just using rubrics. So by using rubrics, we can see the exact areas where the student has strength and is doing well, and then of course the areas where they're struggling more. We can then target the specific areas that are impacting their grade the most. We can see what kind of general rubric score our student is getting compared to the typical score for the class. And if we're using the same rubric again and again and again with the student work samples, that can be a helpful way to progress monitor to see, are they pulling out of the 1 to 2 zone range on the rubric and up into a level that shows more that they're mastering those different standards. So rubrics are pretty much one of the best ways to do writing assessment or writing work sample analysis, and there are already some well-developed rubrics that are already Common Core state standard aligned, meaning that you don't have to be creating your own rubrics. You can pull rubrics from what teachers are currently using in class, but if there aren't any in use or if they're not Common Core aligned, these are some great resources that are developed already that you can just directly download and apply to any work samples you want to pull. So looking at what that looks like, so Elk Grove, local district here in California, has developed these rubrics for every grade level. The ones that they have here have watermarks on them. No big deal, they're still totally accessible. But if you do want to request their original rubrics without the watermark, you can do so. But it breaks it down by grade level and then by the Common Core standards. So we have opinion and argument rubrics, narrative rubrics, you can see going all the way up to informational explanatory. So you would just pick your student's grade level and the area that you're wanting to evaluate more, and then this is what it would look like. So as you can see, it breaks it down into the different Common Core standards over here, and then the rating level here. And we are hoping that students are going to be kind of here at a level 3, which is at grade level. But of course, you know, for any student really, I'm sure we're going to find some areas where they're at a 1 or a 2 level, and that kind of gives us more information then on where to focus some of our instruction and support, or to progress monitor them to say we're going to really focus in on a couple of these specific areas of writing where they're struggling and hope that we can bring them up into a level 2 or a 3 over time. So it also shows what the standards are for the grade level below and the grade level above to give you a little bit of a map of what they should be able to do at a foundational level, and then where they are headed to in the next grade level above. So you can kind of see that trajectory of the building of skills one on top of the other to give you a better sense of, if they're really not at all at the 3rd grade level, let's kind of look back into the 2nd grade level and maybe focus some instruction on these prerequisites that are going to then help them access 3rd grade level. Or if they're starting to really master this and we want to help set them up for the next year, we can kind of preview what they're going to need to be doing the next grade level above. So really, I think helpful tools for writing work sample analysis. This is upper grades, 11th and 12th grade. You can see it's much more detailed and broken down, but it does give us the same types of information that would allow you to rank and analyze a student's writing. The other resource we have, if for whatever reason those rubrics you don't prefer them, you don't like them, they don't work for you, Turnitin worked, they partnered to create Common Core rubrics for high school level. So this is the 9th and 10th grade level. It's set up very similarly, just it might be broken down in a slightly different ranking than the other, so you can take a look at them both and see which one you like more. This one breaks it down by first argument, type writing, informative writing, narrative writing, and they have this is for grades 9 and 10. Let me move this out of the way so we can see. There's also for grades 11 and 12. For 11 and 12, you just have to register. So not a big deal. You would just have to do this before you can download it, but you would get the same type of information. So some really good resources there for writing analysis. Some of you might be thinking, like, my students are nowhere near being able to access that type of standard. They're not writing essays. Their writing is so far below that level that I don't think using a rubric geared towards paragraph or essay writing is going to be appropriate for them. Fair enough, that's probably true. So for students who are not quite there yet, some other ways that we can apply some sort of structure to objectively analyze their writing is through graphic organizers, or even if we need to drill back further, sentence stems to see what can they do, what can they not do right now when it comes to organizing and developing their writing. Oh, I just want to move this. Here we go. So when I'm saying graphic organizers, I'm talking about things like this, where if a student is, really not yet able to generate their own paragraphs or essays, can they at least organize their thoughts in a structured way? So, the typical hamburger writing format of an introduction or a topic sentence, 3 supporting details, and a conclusion. Maybe we can give this visual to the student and a topic prompt and see if they can at least organize their ideas into this format. This is compare contrast. 2 topics, how are they the same? How are they different? Are they able to organize their thoughts this way? Or story elements of character, setting, problem, solution, and theme. Can they propose a story, like a narrative type story, where instead of actually writing the story, they're just jotting down their ideas into this organizer to show that they understand these different elements of creating a story. These rubrics or these graphic organizers came from this link here, where there's a lot of similar ones. If it's something that you want to be pulling from, also really helpful for reading comprehension. You can you read a story to a student or have them read a story, and then rather than just asking detailed comprehension questions or having them write out their answers, they can be organizing what they're hearing from that story into a graphic organizer as you go along, or afterwards, to show that they're really comprehending the story. So good for writing and for reading comprehension. There's other, books and templates online, but this one has a variety of templates created for you. Students who are not even yet at that level, we can even give different sentence stems, sentence starters, or visuals to see how they're able to write in single word answers or really short phrases that are on topic, that show that they're kind of understanding the process of writing by staying on topic with the prompt and being able to write, like I said, single words or short phrases when given visuals or other prompts. So these would be some other samples if you're feeling like a student is not yet at the level of writing full sentences or paragraphs. Giving these types of stems over time, week by week, we can hopefully see that a student is developing the ability to correctly complete these sentences when given familiar stems. So that can be another way to assess where they are with their writing, kind of keep drilling back to see, can they do sentence stems? Yes or no? If yes, maybe can they do a graphic organizer? If yes, then let's give them more of an essay prompt and apply a rubric to it. If at any one of those points we find like, oh, nope, they're really not here yet, then that's where we say, okay, this is the student's baseline. They're able to complete a sentence stem only if they're given a bank of visuals and words, or they're able to complete a sentence stem where they're filling in a one-word answer, and that's giving us a baseline for writing. So that goes back to different ways we can assess and analyze a student's writing outside of the WJ or the Wyatt or Ames web, but by looking at their actual work samples in class through using rubrics, graphic organizers, or sentence stems to see where they are. The last piece we're going to go into today is analyzing work samples for math. I know that a lot of the assessment and topics we've been covering in all of the classes have been very literacy focused. So we are going to spend a little bit of time on math assessment right now, and then math and best practices for math instruction in several weeks. So that is coming. But when analyzing work samples in math, we can be looking at exit tickets, actual in-class assignments and worksheets, homework, unit assessments, really anything the student is already doing to see what their scores are on those assessments, but more importantly, where they're making errors and where they're showing mastery. That error analysis piece is really huge when it comes to math because it, of course, tells us their baseline and tells us what skills we need to teach. So these visuals over these next 3 pages go over common types of computation errors in math, and that's coming from this IRIS webinar right here. For math error analysis. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into the information they have there, here is the link, but it breaks down math computation errors into the most common types that you can be looking for when you're analyzing math work samples. So first thing is just that the student doesn't have basic number facts, meaning when they're given single digit addition or subtraction, they're just not getting the right answer. So that's where they need to start, is those basic number facts of just putting 2 single digits together to get an answer. Moving beyond that, though, another common error is just around place value. So when they're given maybe multi-digit addition, they're not familiar with the organization and the structure for answering these questions correctly. So like in this case, the student just adds these 3 individual numbers together. 2 plus 8 is 10, plus 9 more is 19. The answer is 19. Their actual math is correct. They can do simple addition. They didn't make any errors there in adding these 3 numbers. They just didn't understand the concept of adding the ones placed together and then the tens placed together. Or in this case, they did that, but they just switched where the numbers were meant to go. So their just organization around adding the ones and then adding the tens got confused. Another error here, a really common one we see, is around regrouping. So students show that they have the basic addition facts down, but they're not regrouping correctly to get the right number. So the student did 8 plus 3 is 11. They knew to put the 1 down here in the ones place, but they didn't regroup that extra 1 up here in the tens place. So then they got 7 plus 2 is 9, 91. Again, we can see that they have their simple addition down, but not the regrouping. Or here, similarly, they did 4 plus 7 equals 11, put the 11 down below, 3 plus 5 is 8, 811. So focus area for this student would be on really regrouping from the ones into the tens place. Regrouping when it comes to subtraction is, of course, a big one as well. So not understanding how to regroup from the 0. They're just ignoring that and doing, this is what a lot of students do. They'll find the bigger number minus the smaller number is their answer. So 2 minus 1 is 1. 3 minus 0 is 3. 1 minus nothing is 1. So again, they have their basic subtraction facts down. They're not making any errors in that. They're just going about it in the wrong order and not understanding that regrouping. I highlighted this here because this was actually an error made in this visual, so I don't want you to get confused by that. But students performing incorrect operation, this is meant to be a subtraction sign, and it's showing here that the student added instead of subtracted. What the student did here is they multiplied 3 times 2 equals 6 rather than adding them together. So this could show that a student is just not attending to the basic visuals in the math problems. They might be inattentive, making careless errors, moving through too quickly, or just forgetting what the different symbols mean. So that's helpful for us to know when it comes to targeting instruction. This again is showing, and I think again they made an error here with this addition sign. It meant to be subtraction, but they're always doing the bigger number minus the smaller number. So you can see 5 minus 1 is 4, 4 minus 2 is 2, 3 minus 2 is 1, so they got 124 rather than regrouping when subtracting. So just pretend like that addition sign was meant to be a subtraction sign, because that was an error made by Iris. Adding and subtracting fractions, so of course they're just not finding the common denominator. They're just doing basic 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7. And then when dividing fractions, they're not correctly setting up this problem to get the correct answer of 1/4. So it really should be 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4. So that should be 1/4, but instead they just didn't set up this whole number correctly into a fraction format in order to divide fractions. Those of you who teach these content areas, I'm sure that this resonates much more with you. Those of you teaching younger grades, you're probably not going to have to worry about some of these things, but then, dealing with decimals, not just setting up the problem correctly in the first place to align the decimals. So again, that's kind of an issue around place value and understanding that concept, or not appropriately like moving the decimal over the correct number of spaces when multiplying or dividing. So again, the student understands the concept of multiplication and even multiplying multi-digit numbers. They're just not understanding how the fraction or the decimal works into that. So when you're looking at math computation errors, we're looking at much more than just what's the student's score on this worksheet. We actually want to dig in deeper to why are they getting the answers wrong? What is holding them back here? What skills do we need to reteach or teach in a different way? So we can see with Cole at a surface level, yeah, we can say he got 5 answers wrong. So he got, 10 out of 15 correct on this worksheet. Okay, how does that compare to the other students? Is that, kind of where everyone else is? Can we track that over time to see if he's getting better? All of that's helpful, all of that's good, but it doesn't tell us where he's actually going wrong. So by digging into this and looking at the questions he got incorrect, we can figure out that Cole is one of those students making that error around regrouping when it comes to subtraction problems. So he's doing that mistake of just doing the bigger number minus the smallest number every time, rather than starting at the top and regrouping when needed. So he did 9 minus 7 is 2, 4 minus 3 is 1. Let's see if that, error is consistent with the other errors he's making. And so when we come down here, we're seeing, yep, the same thing. He did 9 minus 6 is 3. 2 minus 2 is 0, 1 minus nothing is 1, 103. So we're seeing again that he's making that same consistent mistake in all of these. Now all we have to do is teach him really this one skill around regrouping when it comes to subtraction, and that's going to address his challenges here in math. So in terms of using this as an assessment tool, we can say, Cole is able to do multi-digit addition problems. He's able to do subtraction problems when it doesn't require regrouping, but when there are subtraction problems that requires regrouping, he's always taking the larger value number minus the smaller value number, and not going about those subtraction problems in the correct sequence that would involve regrouping those. So that gives us a really clear, really specific baseline to Cole that answers that question of, what is he currently able to do and not able to do, and what are the skills that he needs to work on in order to take that next step in his math development. We have a lot of assessments that we've looked at for reading diagnostics, not as much for math. Of course, we have our WJ and our Wyatt, and we have our CBMs for math, but nothing that really digs into the error analysis piece. So the National Center on Intensive Intervention has a supplemental math assessment that is a free tool that you can use if that is something that you feel is needed or is helpful for your students. It's pretty brief. It goes over these different math concepts: counting, basic facts, going up to multiplication and division, place value, whole number computation, and then fractions. And so it gives you directions on the teacher direction page, and then the next page is always going to be the student facing page where it has some visuals, some questions, and then it gives some procedures for scoring, even doing some modeling and some teaching and then seeing if they're able to get it. And then some options here around, this is just the basic scoring key. So you can see it shows the sequence of math skills as they build upon one another. And then it shows, when you kind of stop and when you move on. So until the student's able to, answer yes to all of these, you would just continue focusing on teaching those skills. Once they master it, then you can move on to some other skills here. So then we're getting into basic math facts. And as it goes on towards the end here, getting into division, place value, fractions. So if that is something that you're seeing as a need, is digging into specific skills for error analysis, this can be a tool that can guide you through that process if it's helpful. So I wanted to share that link. It's free. It's from a well-respected resource, the National Center for Intensive Intervention. There's a lot more resources here that we'll be going into in the future, but a good additional tool to break out of all of our reading diagnostics. So that really covers the content for today. I want to take a minute to connect this back to your case study assignment and your case study student. I want you to think for a minute, if you know your student well enough now, and if you've given them some of the other assessment tools, what else you might want to know to really pinpoint the specific skill deficits your student has. If you don't yet have an idea of that, that's okay, but keep it in mind as you are giving your other assessment tools like the WJ or Wyatt or CBMs. After that, what is going to be the final step that you need to take to really identify where the errors are happening or where the specific areas for instruction are, and how you can leverage work samples or additional diagnostic assessments to really pinpoint those specific needs. When it comes to your case study student, this is in our syllabus, so this is not something new, but it does break down the different assessment tools that you'll be giving to your student. So I want to make a really clear connection here to where work samples and CBMs are factoring into our assessment battery for your case study student. So this breaks it down into the 3 different academic areas that you will be testing, even if you know your student is strong in math, for example. For the purpose of this assignment, you're still going to test them in all areas just to get the practice of it and the practice of analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. So for reading, you're going to give the reading battery from the WJ or the Wyatt, so whatever the standard battery is, and then if there are any extended subtests you want to give, you're free to do so. So you're going to select those just based on the student's grade level. In addition to that, you're going to pick one or several CBMs to give. So you can do AIMSweb. You can also do Easy CBM if you want. We're going to go over that in class next time we meet. You're going to select your assessment battery. For young students, you're going to pick the early literacy battery of like 4 subtests around letter name fluency, letter sound fluency, phoneme, and nonsense word. If your student is beyond that, so if they're like 2nd grade or higher, you're going to give reading fluency and or comprehension, depending on what you think is most appropriate. And then you're going to see here that it says survey level assessments if needed. We have not yet talked about survey level assessments, so don't worry about that right now. We're going to talk about it next week, but basically survey level assessment means drilling back grade levels until you find that grade level where the student is scoring in more of that average range. So for students who are performing far below grade level, we're going to give them a grade level probe, but then we're also going to go back until we find their actual kind of instructional level, which might be several years below their actual grade level. So in addition to your formal battery and your CBMs, you're also going to pick one additional reading inventory or reading diagnostic from your literacy class, which might be the basic reading inventory, core phonics. It could be the San Diego Quick. It could be something else that's not listed here that you typically use at your school, and that's also fine too. So there is some flexibility with this informal reading inventory. So that's what you're going to be doing for reading. And like I said, when we meet in person next time, you're going to be identifying your assessment battery as part of an in-class assignment. For writing, you're going to give the writing subtests of the WJ or Wyatt. You're going to do 3 writing samples with error analysis. So again, picking a rubric or using graphic organizers to identify the student's strengths and areas of need. And you're going to do a CBM for writing, so like the AIMSweb test of written expression or spelling. So those are going to be the different things you're doing for writing. And then for math, your math battery, 3 math samples with error analysis, so picking worksheets, unit assessments, in-class assignments, whatever you want, and looking at where the student is making errors in their math. And then of course the CBMs in math too. So using either early numeracy or computation or math concepts and applications from AIMSweb, or if you'd prefer to try out Easy CBM also has those different math subjects that are covered, so you can pick to do that as an alternative, but those are going to be what you're doing for math. So we talked about CBMs today, and we're going to talk more about AIMSweb next week. That's going to cover your CBMs for this. And then today we talked about different ways to analyze work samples for writing and math, which is going to cover this piece of your case study assignment for writing and math. So that might feel a little bit overwhelming right now, given that you're really at the point in your case study assignment of just doing the background section. I really want you to know that you have plenty of time to give these assessments that we're talking about. Your actual assessment piece and the write-up of those are not due until mid-November, so you have a good 4 to 5 weeks to be giving all of those different tests. And it really shouldn't take terribly long. The Wyatt or the WJ alone is going to take 1 to 2 hours. The CBMs take several minutes, and then the work samples you can just pull from work they've already done. So you should have plenty of time. I don't want anyone to start feeling anxious or panicky about it. I just wanted to preview it for you now so that you can start thinking about what's going to make the most sense and start identifying times and places to get some of this assessment data. What I already mentioned is that in your syllabus, you're going to see that it states proposed case study assignment assessment battery due next week. That's something that we're doing in class together, where I'm actually going to give you some time to be identifying what assessments are going to make the most sense for your student, and with the resources you have available at your school, so you can kind of identify your roadmap for assessing that student and make sure that it will fulfill the requirements of this assignment before you get too far into doing it. I want to be able to catch any misconceptions or mistakes early on, so that when you do move forward into assessing, you have a very clear plan of exactly what you need to give and exactly what information you need, so that it's really clear for you. So you don't have to do anything in preparation for that. If you do have some basic information about your student, it's helpful to come with that in mind. But this is something we'll be completing in class together, so it's not an assignment that you need to be worrying about doing outside of class. But for now, I want to just kind of reframe all of this, zoom way back out to what is the focus and what is due right now for your case study assignment. We just talked a lot about a lot of different assessment tools, but right now where we're starting is just with that background section. So we've gone over this in class, but I'm going to go over it one more time to hopefully answer any questions. And again, zoom out and reframe what we're currently focusing on, which is due this upcoming Saturday. It's just starting off with the reason for referral. So is this an initial evaluation for special ed? And if so, who referred the student? Was it their parent? Was it the student success team? And what were the areas of concern? Or is it a triennial, in which case you'll say this is, a triennial evaluation every 3 years that a student is in special ed. They're reevaluated to see their ongoing eligibility and areas of need. So your reason for referral is very brief, just a couple of sentences. Then you're going into educational history, kind of getting a snapshot of what the student's educational background is and how they might have come to this place of needing this evaluation. So have they attended school regularly? What have been the trends in their report cards? When did they first enter special ed, and what supports have they been receiving? So this might be anywhere from a half a page up to more than a page, kind of depending on their background. If you're working with a high schooler, you don't need to go into detail every year from kindergarten on. You can do a general summary of their elementary and middle school years, and then maybe talk a little bit more in depth about the past, few years of their IEP. If you're working with younger students, you're going to really talk more specifically about their attendance and their report cards, from the time they've been in elementary school. But just getting a snapshot of what trends we're seeing in terms of where their strengths and weaknesses have been, and anything that might have impacted their education, such as moving schools, such as, any sort of traumatic events. You're going to get a little bit of information on the student's health. Do they need glasses? Do they take medication? Do they have frequent illnesses? And then parent interview piece. So just getting input from the parent of what they see as their student's strengths and weaknesses, and what they're hoping their student will work on and improve on in the upcoming years. And there is that sample parent interview document in our Google folder. If you would like some guidance on questions to ask. If you know the parent really well and you've had many conversations with them, you can just summarize that parent interview from what you already know of that parent. Or if you've had a recent IEP meeting or parent-teacher conference, you can use that as your parent interview as well. This doesn't have to be something very formal. You don't have to call up the parent and go into detailed questions if you already have a lot of this information. But if you haven't had a lot of contact with this parent, you probably will want to make a phone call or send home a questionnaire to get some of this information. So I'm going to leave that up to you about what you think is most appropriate and most useful. But there are several options for how to do that there. And then the last page is just a brief paragraph long summary of classroom behavior that might require you to do a quick observation in class in another classroom space, or to summarize the general behavior when the student's in your classroom, or to talk to their other teachers. But just a quick summary of, is the student able to stay focused? Are they able to complete their work? Can they manage their materials? Are there any major behavioral flags that could be impacting their learning? Again, this is a very general statement, no more than half a page, so nothing that should take a lot of extra work to do, just summarizing what you do know of that student. And I'm going to show you where that is, again, just in case. Sorry for everyone seeing my emails. I don't think there's anything too detailed there, but in our class folder, which I have added some additional details to the name to make it stand out that this is for my class, if we go into syllabus and assignments, we have the case study outline and the parent interview template here. If that is helpful, that is where you can find those things. And that should really bring us to the end. So thanks for sticking with me for this. The reflection that I'm asking you to do for this webinar as your attendance points, your participation points to show that you did engage in this classwork this week, is to shoot me a really brief email. Oh, this goes back to your case study part 1. So yeah, due by Saturday. I'm going to try to spend some time next week on scoring. You can email me your case study part 1 template, or you can put it in your syllabus and assignment folder. For our reading reflection, or it's called reading reflection, module reflection, whatever it is for this class to show that you participated, is going to be a quick email to me. And I just want you to provide the following feedback as a way to help me better improve this course for the rest of our semester together, and then improve the course for future years. So regarding the material in this webinar, one piece of information that you felt was particularly helpful or relevant to your teaching practice or to your case study assignment, if you didn't find any of this content to be particularly helpful, that's fine too. Let me know that. I'm really asking for this feedback just so that I can get a better sense of what content is sticking with you the most and is proving to be the most relevant and helpful to you, so that I get a better idea of the kind of information to continue focusing on, or the types of resources to continue sharing out as we move forward. So it is helpful for me to know what is meaningful for you about this content, and then what is not. So again, it's totally fine if you say that this wasn't particularly relevant. I do want to know that too. This question here is not to stroke my ego, but really just to better understand how to improve this class and this content. I also want to know one area of assessment practices in general, or any of the content related to this class around assessment, error analysis, IEP development, that you are still hoping to really focus on, learn more about, or go into more detail on by the end of the semester. So it could be content that we've already covered that you feel like you want more detail on, or you want to revisit, or it could be content that we haven't yet covered but is really high priority to you, so you want to make sure we really focus on that closely in our upcoming weeks, so that I can make sure that by the time we get to the end of this semester, everyone's revisited or gotten the content that they are really needing to get out of this class. Also, let me know if you have any lingering questions about the WJ or the Wyatt from our last 2 weeks of practicing with that hands-on. If there's more information or resources you need, I can look into finding those for you or answering any questions. And then if there's any other feedback that you have that can help improve this course, please do let me know that too. And that is all that you're going to need to do. This email response shouldn't take you more than several minutes, I hope. So that is where we are for now. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all in person again soon. And yeah, please do let me know if you have any questions, any clarification, or any feedback that will help make this time and this content more meaningful for you, so that you can all go out and be even stronger, more confident teachers to your students. Have a great week this week. Good luck with your other classes, and I will see you all soon. Okay, bye.